It's important also to note that there are many other alternative sources that can be considered, including biomass fuel, which it is something that the CSIR has also raised as a point for consideration. Honorable Speaker, the oil industry is a capital-intensive, low-margin industry driven by high-volume sales for economies of scale. In our country, whose market demand is almost equivalent to the Los Angeles areas, it is not possible to deregulate the market and ensure competition in the normal sense, as is the case with large-volume economies like the USA. And therefore, it is important that when we make such consideration, we must be able to ensure that we carry all that is necessary. Lastly, on this matter, Chair, we request that the two ministers, both finance and mineral resources and energy, expedite the investment in refining, as it positively contributes to beneficiation and manufacture, but also as the effect of reducing the impact of the balance of payment in dollar terms for our country. I think it's important to make this last point, that we can't have a one-size-fits-all. The issue of fuel and petrol hikes is a complex matter. By the way, if you look in terms of integrated energy plan, amongst other issues, in order to build your productive sectors of the economy, is the new developments in terms of your electric vehicles. Any comprehensive strategy that does not take the new phenomenon on board, it is flawed. It cannot be comprehensive, because what is in the new in the auto industry is that there are electric vehicles that by manufacturing, if we were to manufacture or assemble the majority of them in South Africa, it will be something that is not related to the fuel hikes. And therefore, any comprehensive strategy must take that to a longer period. Honorable Speaker, we raise those issues just with one quote again from Sowell. It is hard to imagine a more stupid or more dangerous way of making decisions than by putting those decisions in the hands of people who pay no price for being wrong, open and close quote. We have got a duty and a responsibility that we cannot make any mistake, because the people are looking forward from the leadership of the people's movement. And therefore, we will take responsibility for failures. Hence, we must avoid them now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable, the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, honourable members, when the DA removes the ANC from national government in 2024, we will slash the petrol price by R6 per litre. We'll slash it by cutting fuel prices and fuel taxes and by deregulating the fuel market. We will slash it because we actually care about the people who are struggling to make ends meet. The reality is that not every South African has got a couple of $1 million shoved into a couch at home that will enable them to weather the coming winter of discontent. We care, unlike the Honourable Azipo, that workers can barely afford the taxi fare to get to work, and those without work can't afford to go out and look for work. Government's petrol price increases have pushed the food prices up dramatically, all because they are green and because they now need to understand that their tax is more important than the food price to ordinary South Africans. They've also driven up that cost because the rail system under the ANC has collapsed entirely, which means that the majority of the food in South Africa is transported by road and therefore goes up when the petrol price goes up. When the DA removes the ANC from national government in 2024, we will slash fuel prices to bring down the cost of food. Yes, Honorable Koenoff, you told us we were dreaming about Tshwane and Joburg and Nelson Mandela Bay and every other municipality where you've been kicked out of office. The DA cares that parents and grandparents have to look into the eyes of hungry children every night.
Actually, can I please call a point of order? My leader needs a little bit of protection because I'm sitting right here and I can't hear him. So if you could just ask the House to have a little bit of decorum.
All of you, including in your ranks, have some decorum. Go ahead, Honourable Member.
The DA cares that parents and grandparents have to look into the eyes of hungry children to tell them that there's nothing for supper. The DA cares that school children have to study on empty stomachs and that millions are suffering from childhood stunting because of the lack of food. And for honestly, Honourable Luzipo, your economic platitudes and your jargon mean absolutely nothing to those parents who cannot put food on the table. We will do so because we care about jobs, and we understand that jobs come from a healthy economy and businesses that are thriving and creating jobs. And they are created when you reduce the input costs. When the DA removes the ANC from national government in 2024, we will slash fuel prices because we know, unlike the ANC, that fuel prices affect the poorest of the poor the most. Poor families spend the highest proportion of their salaries on transport and food. Cutting fuel prices will lift millions out of poverty. Fuel prices are high because government slaps on taxes. A full third of the fuel price is taxes that go to government. Taxes that pay for the incapable and corrupt state. 6 rand per litre. 6 rand per litre. That's how much more our citizens are paying for petrol more than countries like Botswana. We have the same problems that the Honourable Luzipo outlined, and they don't slap on the tax because they understand. We need to recognize the urgency of the situation now. We need to slash petrol prices now. And we can afford to do it. We can afford to do it if we get tough on corruption. We can afford it. If we end cater deployment, we can afford it. If we slash the VIP protection budget, we can afford it. If we close failed state-owned entities, we can afford it. What the ANC can't afford is to keep off ripping off ordinary South Africans because we are gutful of having to pay the price for your corruption. We also need a president. We also need a president of this country who's got a full-time focus on running the country. Not one eye on his business and one eye on his farm. Full-time serving the people of South Africa. The billionaire president can afford to pack up and leave and go anywhere. It's ordinary South Africans who've got no choice. We have to make South Africa work. So if you care about anything at all on the government benches, cut the fuel price. Because if you don't, I would advise you to look at what happened in the Arab Spring. I would advise you to see what is happening right now in Sri Lanka.
Point of order.
And if you don't do it, I
order.
can promise you this. In 2024, the DA is going to do it for you.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to check if it's parliamentary to say Gatford.
Yeah, no, Honourable Steenhuisen, that fancy Afrikaans expression is not parliamentary. Don't use it, please. And so, no, Chief Whip, don't use it as well.
Well, I can tell you, Deputy Speaker, it's a lot more part of polite lexicon than the word the President used at this very podium 2 weeks ago.
No. 2 wrongs don't make a right, Honourable Member. No.
Point of order.
Yes, what's your point of order, Honourable Member?
On a point of order, Deputy Speaker, when one looks at that word, it is a colloquial word which means...
No. Honourable Member, you can try that luck with someone else.
I will try it until the cows come home.
Yes, don't. It's unparliamentary and we will rule it unparliamentary. It's not okay in a gentle house like this one. If you start using Gatford, then every member here is going to use other similarly fanciful language. It's unparliamentary. Just be satisfied. No, we are not debating this. It's just out of order. Please, and honorable members, be warned. We will rule you out of order if you use it. There's a honorable members order. Order, honorable members. Order. EFF. Please, honorable members of the EFF, we should have had your name here. Just like the IFP, we don't have your name here, who's going to come. And similarly, UDM and honorable members of COPE and PAC. Just tell us who's going to debate on your behalf. We would like to name you when we call you. No. Why do you speak, member, without being invited? I'm just telling you what we expect of you to do. This is expected of everyone in the House. You don't have to comment on that thing. Just save your opinion. Go ahead, honorable member.
Speaker.
Thank you, Chairperson. South Africa's fuel crisis is not a result of natural forces that are beyond human control. A natural force so big we can only be big, we can only throw up our hands in horror and despair. The simple truth is that South Africa faces big problems because of unaffordable fuel price hikes. This is because ANC ministers and their families, friends and comrades want to steal as much as public money as they can. When former Minister of Energy, Ms. Kubai, admitted that the country's strategic fuel stock was sold in a corrupt secret deal in 2016, the EFF was the only party that said arrest the looters, including Ms. Tina Jumat-Peterson. We said that because we understood that the shifts and changes in geopolitics and international trends. But because Glencore and the corrupt criminal syndicate that operates through bribes and illicit financial flows was one of the beneficiaries of the loot, no one has been held to account. It is the same Glencore that benefited Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa in deals for political leverage. We are not shocked by these fuel price increases because we have warned in the past that the government does not have a practical or believable plan to address the rising cost of living in short and medium term, nor over the long term. To accept the excuse by the government that these increases in petrol, diesel, and paraffin are unavoidable because of crude oil prices and the rand and dollar exchange rate is to accept a collective incompetent government. It is to accept the ANC's corrupt government. It is definitely to an acceptance of the shambolic state of the mismanaged economy as if it is normal. You increase the price of fuel, you increase the price of food, the price of bread, the price of vegetables, and prices of all basic necessities. You increase the price of fuel, you increase the price of transport for school learners and workers whose wages have stagnated for years. You increase the price of fuel, you kill small businesses which are already struggling. You increase the price of fuel, you leave households without means to cook and keep warm. More than 2 million families use paraffin to cook and keep warm during winter because they do not have a choice. Even when they know it is highly flammable and toxic, they rely on it and now cannot even afford the only available means within their reach. This is the reality for many workers and poor households. The reality that many of us here with ministerial benefits, parliamentary shuttles, and free flights will not understand. Honorable Chairperson, the temporary reduction in the fuel levy of 150 has brought no meaningful relief to our people. It is a reactionary and desperate attempt to look as if the government has a plan, whereas they are clueless. To resolve the fuel hike price, we must do the following. Fast track the review of fuel prices, and at the center of this should be the poorest, not businesses. We must rebuild and increase strategic fuel stock. We must stabilize the Central Energy Fund, and the fund must be allowed to fund and build state-owned oil refineries. Any advice contrary to this is not honest and is motivated by narrow capitalist interests. It is both foolish and incompetent to depend on more than 60% of fuel imports to meet demand instead of building a reliable refinery industry. We must reclaim and nationalize Sasol. We must build state capacity to turn coal into oil and also increase research and development in the biofuel industry. This government has even been outshined by young people who have started producing their own fuel with all the resources at its disposal. These efforts must be maximized and they must be funded. But we all know, lastly, we must do away with the fuel levy with immediate effect. But we know that a corrupt ANC is neither willing nor able to put any solution into action. The EFF will always be on the side of the workers and the poor, and we will take this fight head on. We know that the ANC president, Mr. Ramaphosa, is busy with money laundering and proceeds of crime on his farms, and he has no business being in government to resolve process.
Honorable member, you are not allowed to say what you just said without a substantial motion.
Which one am I not allowed to say?
Listen, honorable member, I'm talking to you. You withdraw that statement immediately.
Which statement am I withdrawing, Chairperson?
The one you said about Mr. Ramaphosa, what you said he did.
I said a lot of things about him. Can you
withdraw it?
As well?
If you don't withdraw
I said
it,
a lot of things, Chairperson. Can
say
you?
what?
I said a lot of things about him. Please just
withdraw. Are you prepared to withdraw?
What am I withdrawing?
On a point of order,
Please be specific as to what am I withdrawing so that I can.
Honorable member, I'm not
Deputy
going to
Speaker, on a point of order.
You
Deputy
repeat it. You repeat
Deputy
it.
Speaker, on a point of order, there's nothing that Commissioner Plenary is going to withdraw there. There's nothing that's going to withdraw.
You repeat it, you stop talking.
On a point of order, Deputy Speaker.
You stop talking if you are not going to withdraw. Honorable member, I'm talking to a member here. You wait. I'll give you a chance to speak.
No,
honorable member, withdraw.
I'm protecting
honorable member
from your unruly behavior.
Honorable member.
Protecting my member from your
unruly
behavior. What exactly am I
protecting my member from your
Honorable
unruly behavior.
You are talking without being recognized. You're going to leave this house. You will leave this house. You will leave this house. Honorable member, honorable member, honorable member, you have a choice to withdraw or you go to your seat.
There's nothing to withdraw.
Please be specific.
Okay. Honorable, what did she say?
Please be specific as to what.
Okay, honorable member, you don't want to withdraw, you stop talking.
But what am I withdrawing? Can I please be told what exactly?
If you don't want to withdraw, you are not proceeding. I told you, you choose not to hear, you leave the podium, honorable member.
Can you please be specific? What exactly am I supposed to? You said
what you said about Mr. Ramaphosa, the president, you must withdraw.
I've said a lot of things about the president. What
you withdraw it, if you don't, you go.
I have said a lot of things about the president. Which one?
You withdraw.
What am I withdrawing?
You are not going to continue. I can assure you of that. I can assure you of that. You are not going to continue. You are not going to continue. Simple.
Deputy Speaker.
Honorable member, go and sit down.
Deputy Speaker.
You have a choice. You have it. Honorable members, I don't want your help. Honorable members.
But you're not helping us. We don't know what the member said. We don't know what she's supposed to withdraw.
I said you should leave the podium if you refuse to withdraw what you said.
But what am I withdrawing, House Chairperson?
Honorable members. Honorable
Deputy
members.
Speaker. Deputy Speaker, on a point of order.
I am not your coach with your unparliamentary language, and she's going to withdraw. Honorable member.
Deputy Speaker, can we help you? Can we help you? Deputy Speaker, can we help you on a point of order?
You are not going to proceed.
Deputy Speaker, on a point of order.
What am I withdrawing?
Deputy
Please
Speaker, on a
advise
point
You
of
me
are
on
order.
what
not
exactly you're
going
withdrawing.
to proceed without withdrawing your
Stop
statement.
being
You
bully,
refuse to
man,
do it.
Deputy Speaker.
You
What's
are
your
not going
problem?
to proceed.
Stop
You
being
know what you
bully.
said.
She's asking what
It's
must
your
you withdraw?
speech. It's not mine. And I pointed out what it is that you said. You go ahead and withdraw.
She's not withdrawing anything. She's not withdrawing anything when a Deputy Speaker. Stop being bully.
You are wasting your time and our time.
Deputy Speaker,
Honorable member,
I have
this is the
not-
last time I call you. If you don't want to, I'll ask the Sergeant at Arms to remove you.
I did not say I'm not going to withdraw. I asked what exactly am I supposed to
Honorable member, get away from the podium
do?
if you
You bring us
refuse.
up again now. I'm
You are
asking
not-
a simple question.
you
What
are
is it
not
that I'm supposed to
going
withdraw?
To proceed, honorable member, please just get off the. I have
It's not enough that you
Honorable members,
if you want to bring us
honorable
up again.
members.
Tell me what is it that I'm supposed
Honorable
to do?
members, I have indicated what the member should say in her immediate response, and so she must withdraw that.
We didn't hear you.
She must withdraw that. What is unparliamentary is in the rules, and you know it. I am not going to be a conduit for unparliamentary remarks that you make knowingly, and you want me to repeat them. I am not going to repeat your unparliamentary remarks, and you know them. And if you don't want to withdraw them, then you forfeit your right to consider to speak.
On a point of order, Deputy Speaker.
Paraphrase it
What's your
for us,
point of
then,
order?
Deputy Speaker.
What is your point of order?
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, you would know per rules. You need to tell the member what she said and what is parliamentary
Honorable member.
and what she have said.
Honorable
You must
member.
follow the rules to the T.
Honor-
You
honorable-
can't expect. Now you are saying she must withdraw.
Honorable
What does she
member.
withdraw? Okay,
Honorable
she
member.
withdraw was.
Honorable
She withdraw
member.
was. She withdraw the word was.
Honorable
She
member,
withdraw the word was and she withdraw the word the.
you have finished
Don't
talking
say
now.
she
Take your
must
seats.
withdraw.
Take your seat, honorable member.
Withdraw the.
Honorable member, each one of you here knows the rules. You are knowingly making statements in the House. When I ask you to withdraw them, you withdraw them. Simple.
But please
Simple.
specify what
Unparliamentary
you
remarks.
say withdraw.
Yes, honorable member. What are you raising, honorable member?
Not challenging your ruling, Deputy Speaker.
Honorable member, talk to me, please.
Say to you that I think it is unreasonable for you as a presiding officer not to tell the member what she has to withdraw. This is important as well. It is important because your ruling has to go to the annotated digest of rulings,
Honorable,
unparliamentary language.
honorable member, I'll tell you, I spoke immediately after this member made mention of the president. Listen to me. Listen to me, honorable member. I spoke immediately after she said it, and I said, withdraw that. So she must withdraw that. You will go to
Aye,
answer
Deputy
if you want
Speaker.
it.
Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker.
That's not true.
Honorable members.
Deputy Speaker,
Yes.
Deputy
to be
Speaker.
able to advise my parliamentary caucus.
Yes.
Yes.
Now ruled as
I call it
Yes.
they don't repeat it. I can't
Yes.
do that
Yeah,
if it's
okay.
not on the record.
Correct. And some of us are following
Honorable members.
this proceeding.
Honorable members, let me point out to you. I have made a ruling here.
Aye, man.
I have made a ruling on this matter, and the ruling is that as soon as the honorable member made reference to the president in the way she did, where she stopped, I said to her, withdraw what you are
did
saying.
You don't even know yourself what she said.
Because
You don't
it
know.
is
That's why
unparliamentary.
you can't say it.
Deputy
You don't know
Speaker,
what
If
you said
she
yourself.
refuses to do so,
You don't
which is
know.
defying the authority of the chair, she is breaking an additional rule,
No,
and
man,
she's not going to proceed.
No,
Deputy
you don't know
Speaker.
yourself. What do you want her to
I
withdraw?
have
You
made a
don't know.
ruling on this
But
matter,
that's
and
not
I'm not
you're wasting
proceeding.
your own time.
Deputy Speaker, but in all fairness, I mean, we are on
Honorable
the
member.
platform.
You get away from the podium. Sergeant at Arms.
But you see, you don't recognize us from the
Sergeant at
platform. It's
Arms,
as if we're not in the
talk to the
house.
member to get off the ruling.
No, Deputy Speaker. No, man. No. We are more Shango.
Honorable member,
Oh, once and
we
done.
request you to leave the house.
We are more Shango.
Honorable member, honorable members, order.
There's no order. You're
Honorable
out of
member,
order, sir.
we are refusing.
But you are out of order. Deputy Speaker Mosham, in all honesty.
We are
going to remove, Honorable Member.
Deputy Speaker, we are trying to help you, sir. We are not trying to degenerate the House. We are trying to help you.
Leave the House.
A spokesperson of the
Honorable Member, leave the House.
I'm not a I'm a member of Parliament, so I have to say when things go, say something when things go wrong. Deputy Speaker, I raised my.
All I am asking is to be told what I need.
But I equally
Honorable Member, we will leave the House.
For what?
On a point of order, Deputy Speaker.
Executive Acts.
Point of order.
Point of order, Deputy Speaker.
Order.
But this is not Deputy Speaker's house. This is our house.
You want to eat, man? Just sit down.
of Parliament.
Point of order, Deputy Speaker. Point of order. How?
No. The Deputy Speaker is actually bullying the honorable member. And also, we're in the House. We're trying to rise on points of orders. We're not being recognized. It's almost like we're not in the House.
Honorable Member, you are going to have to leave the House. Deputy Speaker.
Man. But this thing, we are also
Honorable
Deputy Speaker, but we're also in the House. When we follow these proceedings virtually, we're also in the House. We rise on a point of order. You're supposed to entertain it.
Point of order, Honorable Speaker. Due respect, Honorable Deputy Speaker. No one.
What are you rising on?
I'm rising on a point of. Honorable Deputy Speaker, I'm rising on a point of order without challenging your ruling. Comrades, can you keep quiet? I'm rising on a point of order, Honorable Deputy Speaker, without engaging on your ruling. But the fact here, the honorable member requests you to explain what is that she must withdraw. She's not refusing to withdraw. I'm sorry to do this to you, but we are just trying to assist because we are all here. Please, Honorable PS.
Yeah. Honorable Deputy Speaker. Honorable Deputy Speaker.
Honorable Deputy Speaker.
Yeah. Go ahead, Honorable Member.
Yeah, Honorable Deputy Speaker, I rise on a point of order, and just to follow the Chief Whip of the Majority Party, will it not be advisable in the interest of us proceeding, I know it's the last day of our session, that you refer to Hansard and you can rule at some other time? Reconsider your ruling after you've looked at Hansard, and then we can continue with this session.
Honorable Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much. Honorable Gahube.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, the problem here that we have is that this will set a very bad precedent for the House. If we do not have a codified list of words that are deemed unparliamentary, then we will never know not to repeat them. And you refusing to repeat what words the member used is now causing this House to be entirely disorderly, and it will collapse the House. So I am pleading with you, Deputy Speaker, to refer to the specific words that should be deemed unparliamentary for the record purposes, so that we will all know what words to use and what words not to use.
Honorable
members, can I just...
Honorable Deputy Speaker, may I also say something? Yeah. You didn't hear all of us.
Where are you? Go ahead.
No, we wanted
honorable members, take your seat, settle down. Take your honorable members standing. Honorable Mazzoni, honorable members, take your seats, please. Settle down. Honorable members, order.
Ngathi kwi-payroll ka-president kodwa Deputy Speaker.
You will be ordered, honorable members.
Deputy Speaker.
Yes, go ahead, honorable member.
I just have an appeal. Even when we called you earlier, we rose on points of orders. We wanted to help the House. We didn't want to disrupt the proceedings of the House. But I want to appeal to you that you treat us the same as those members who are sitting in the House physically. Because when we rise on points of orders on the platform here, it's because we want to help you, or we also want to help the proceedings of the House. I mean, it's unfair that we rise on points of orders, raise hands, try to interject, and we get ignored in the process of you arriving or making a decision. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Thank you, honorable member, for raising that. We will coordinate better with the front desk so that I can see when you have your hand up on the screen there. We will do that. Honorable members, these are my reasons for not repeating what was said earlier on. I will repeat it, and it is for the last time it happens. And I'll tell you why. I'm aware this is a deliberate intention to say things and give the impression you don't remember when you know exactly what you said. I am talking to honorable members, I am talking, and I gave you an opportunity to speak. Breaking the rules and playing clever by half is unacceptable. Is unacceptable. This honorable member in her remarks, he said, Mr. Ramaphosa, the president, is busy with money laundering. This is the expression she used. Honorable members, you cannot make such a statement in the House without a substantive motion. And if you don't want to withdraw, honorable member, I have already ruled on you anyway. So you withdraw, you have a choice. Honorable member.
What is the other choice, Deputy Speaker?
Honorable member, you are playing games now. I have told you what you said. If you don't withdraw, you please go, and I'm not repeating this.
It's fine, I will not withdraw.
Go ahead, yeah. You leave the House.
Honorable Senga.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker. It is a matter of public record.
Honorable member, leave the House. You can't sit. Honorable member, you can't sit there. You must leave. No. You must leave, honorable member. Sergeant at Arms, please escort the member out of the House.
On a point of order, point of order, Deputy Speaker.
Yeah.
On a point of order, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker.
Order, honorable members, order.
Uthe makahlale phansi akhange uthi makaphume. I-ruling enjani le tshintsha-tshintshayo? Hayi siyababona abanedollars.
Honorable member.
Ezipokothini siyababona.
Don't complicate things by pointing at me. Please leave. Honorable member Madokwe, I ask you to leave. Honorable members on your feet, you either settle down or leave with her. You have a choice.
Speaker, point of order, please.
Who's speaking?
Speaker, point of order. Speaker.
Honorable Madokwe, please leave the House.
Speaker, point of order, please, Speaker.
No, please. Let me finish with the member, please, respectfully. The House must be respected and its rules. And if we are not able to enforce any rules in the House, there's no point in us sitting here. Speaker. So we request the member to comply with the rulings of a presiding officer.
Speaker, you said there in front. She must leave the podium and go sit down. Now you're saying she must leave the House.
Honorable member, I said the member must leave the House. She refused to withdraw and she must leave the House.
You can't debate this ruling that I made.
Leave the podium. We didn't say she must leave the house. You said leave the podium. We didn't say leave the house, Speaker.
Honorable member. Honorable member.
No,
you can't debate a ruling that I made. You are violating the rules of the House. Leave, Honorable Madogwe. Please leave. You are obstructing the House. You are now obstructing the House. Honorable member, leave. Honorable Madogwe.
The ANC people are useless.
Honorable Sengwa, please proceed. Honorable
Chair.
Please go.
Yeah, Honorable Deputy Speaker.
Honorable Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker. I think.
Okay, all right.
Deputy Speaker.
Yes.
I think until order is restored, it will be difficult to hear Honorable Slangwa.
Yeah, no, I did say that, Honorable Member. Please, thank you very much. Honorable Tia, Honorable Muntueli. Okay, you given up. So, right, thanks. Okay, go ahead, Honorable Slangwa.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker. It is a matter of public record that the Inkatha Freedom Party has been pleading with government for years now to provide relief to ordinary South Africans in relation to the ever-increasing fuel prices. We have written letter upon letter amongst others, and in July 2018 to the then Speaker Balega Mbete to request an urgent debate calling for the suspension of fuel levies as we are debating today. This request was rejected, resulting in a protracted exchange of correspondence until the debate was scheduled. We launched a Suspend Fuel Levies campaign that same year, followed by an open letter to the President in October 2018, echoing the cries of South Africans calling for an urgent reprieve. I will remind the President now, as I did in my letter to him, of an ANC statement of 16 September 1993 titled ANC Demands Suspension of Petrol Price Increase, which said the following: the ill-considered and uncaring decision to increase the petrol price only confirms the NP government does not have the interests of the majority of South Africans who are poor and struggling desperately to make ends meet. At heart, now is the time to establish the tradition of a government that cares for and consults with its citizens. It is both ironic and tragic that as opposition parties today and every other day since, we now find ourselves echoing this same petition, and that the ruling party, who have the means to make a lasting difference, consistently choose to ignore the plight of the poor. During the almost 4 years since that open letter, the IFP has continued to unfailingly call upon government to review the fuel price structure, in particular the excessive levies that form almost a third of the cost of a litre of petrol. Most recently, in March 2022, after we again called on government to suspend fuel levies with immediate effect, temporary relief was offered by the Minister of Finance and has since been extended to 2 August 2022. Unfortunately, this was merely a smokescreen. As of 3 August, the fuel levy will be reinstated in full, with the public again left to carry not only the increased fuel cost, but the rapidly rising cost of food and other necessities that accompany every fuel hike. However, according to a 31 May joint media statement by Treasury and DMRE, it seems another decrease is on the cards, and I quote, after a review and a consultation by DMRE, it is proposed that the basic fuel levy price also be decreased by 3 cents per litre in the coming months. This is a complete insult to the people of South Africa, particularly one considers that billions of rands that are fettered away each and every year by government departments. The Road Accident Fund, which is funded through an exorbitant fuel-based levy, continues to be mismanaged and is now in court challenging a disclaimed audit outcome. Why must the people continue through fuel levies fund an entity quite clearly unable to manage its own financial affairs? The entire fuel structure must be changed in favor of commuters, consumers, and the economy. Fuel levies are not a blank check. According to the AG's 2020-2021 Citizens Report detailing the audits of national and provincial governments, unauthorized expenditure has increased every year for the past 3 years, reaching 3.2 billion rands in 2021. Further, irregular expenditure soared to 166 billion rands and 1.7 billion rands in fruitless and wasteful expenditure. This is over 170 billion rands lost, yet government can only offer citizens a 3 cents per litre reduction.
Your time has expired.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Honorable Boshoff.
Agbare young speaker, baie dankie. Die krisis wat ons tans beleef met brandstofpryse is 'n krisis bo op 'n krisis. Die Suid-Afrikaanse ekonomie was reeds nie in 'n goeie toestand nie. Toe 'n oorlog uitbreek en oorlog het 'n manier om uit te breek waar olie volop is, waaroor ons geen beheer het nie. Met 'n swak rand en met 'n hoë olieprys word die prys van brandstof net eenvoudig onbekostigbaar. Energie wat te duur is, kan 'n ekonomie tot stilstand dwing. Dit kan maak dat daar niks anders meer kan gebruik nie, want energie is immers die dryfkrag van enige ekonomie. Now the components of the fuel price can be taken back to the basic fuel price, which not a lot can be done about. It can be recalculated in another way, but it's going according to the price of the rand and according to the price of crude oil. Then we have the different margins for retail and for wholesale, and we can tweak that, but maybe that wouldn't make such a difference either. It lets me think a lot about somebody who's always being stopped at the aeroplane for luggage which is too heavy and then decides to pack short sleeve shirts and rather than long sleeve shirts. It may help, but it's not going to make the difference. Then we have the road accident fund, and a lot of diesel, even petrol, is burned by people who want to get around load shedding. That petrol or diesel never see a road and should not contribute towards the road accident fund. And then we have the tax, the levy which goes into the fiscus, which is around 477. Now, in South Africa, we don't tax maize meal because it is a staple, because we know that a lot of people won't have anything to eat if you tax maize meal, although other things are taxed. We also don't tax small incomes. There's a amount you have to go over before you have to start paying taxes, a drempel in Afrikaans. Petrol and diesel is approaching the stage where we can't tax that either, because it will grind the whole economy to a halt at this price. Now, if we compare the money which will be lost to the fiscus, if we take the petrol levy or the fuel levy away, it's about 90 billion rand per annum. If we compare that to lost revenue due to the COVID-related, what do you call the Grendelstaat, a lockdown, when we compare it to the loss due to the lockdown, that was about 300 billion rand. And that was taken from the economy. Now, if we just end the petrol levy, then we inject another 90 billion rand into the economy, which will be spent by businesses, by consumers, and it will add to the economy. It can ignite economic growth. Therefore, it might not be a loss to the economy. It might actually be a gain even to the fiscus. Therefore, this is a Freedom Front's plea, that everything which goes to the state out of the petrol and diesel price should just be abolished. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Trin.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, the ACDP agrees with most South Africans in stating that the recent fuel hikes could not have come at a worse time, taking the price to just under 25 Rand per litre for inland users and around 24 Rand per litre along the coast. South Africans are struggling under the weight of 46% unemployment on the expanded definition, rolling blackouts, business closures from the harsh lockdown, and irrational COVID regulations, flooding, drought, and collapsing service delivery. Honourable Deputy Speaker, any rational thinking person will conclude that the majority of South Africans just cannot afford to pay for these increases in the fuel levy. With the global price of oil currently sitting at over $120 per barrel and the rand weakening at 16 Rand 11 to the dollar, our currency has been vulnerable to the bouts of weakness due to the strengthening of the dollar. As a net importer of crude oil, this paints a grim picture for not only South African motorists, but the general public at large. The ACDP agrees with the economists that every aspect of our economy, including consumers and businesses alike, will be hard hit by the fuel hikes. The impact will be severe and will have a ripple effect further down the economy on a macro level in terms of inflation. Transporters of goods and passengers cannot absorb the increased costs of fuel, as this will put them out of business. The reality is that these increased costs will be transferred to the public. We must do away with what economists call price stickiness, even though we are price takers when it comes to oil. We must rid this government and its department of corruption, fraud, inefficiencies, and jobs for cadres. For in so doing, there will be sufficient reserves to cover these exorbitant fuel levies. While welcoming the reduction in the fuel levy, where with the extension, R1.50 will be taken off the general fuel levy in June and will then be halved to 75 cents per litre in July, the ACDP adds its voice to those of concerned South Africans calling for the scrapping of the fuel levy, and furthermore calls on African countries rich in oil to sell to their African counterparts at a price which will ensure that the African economies will not collapse. The ACDP cares, and only the uncaring will continue to inflict hardships on the poorest of the poor by these exorbitant fuel levies. Thank you, Speaker. Deputy Speaker.
Honourable Kwankwa.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. South Africa, already grappling with high unemployment, floods, violent crimes, and economic decline, is facing yet another challenge, rising fuel prices. The recent increase means fuel is around 40% more expensive than a year ago. This naturally affects the inflation, which is the price of goods, the increase in the price of goods in South Africa. Price increases reduce the purchasing power of money, that in turn has an adverse impact on consumer welfare. For an example, take a case of people in rural areas who solely depend on social grants to buy food, build houses, support their children with a mere 1,900 rands a month. How are they expected to survive? Also imagine a Madlamini from Khayelitsha who's unemployed, who has to pay about 110 rands for just a 2 litre of cooking oil. It's difficult for our people to survive, and that calls on us as leaders to do something and to intervene in the market to ensure that we provide even more protection to the poor and the vulnerable. Imagine also a young student or young people who use public transport to look for jobs. With these prices, they might end up, instead of looking for jobs, they would have to consider the opportunity cost of taking a taxi to look for a job in order to submit a CV and to buy a loaf of bread, because the cost of living has become expensive and is causing frustrations to the poor. We must not be surprised if the poor rise up and rebel against us because we are not reacting to their challenges and to their concerns timelessly. Deputy Speaker, we are of the view that, for instance, you will recall that Africa launched its continental free trade area, and there was a huge launch where the presidents of the different countries signed the launching of the continental free trade agreement. The purpose of that was to boost intra-Africa trade. For us, it makes perfect sense, or better sense for Africa, South Africa rather, to start considering importing fuel from African countries within Africa, but enter into negotiations to make sure that the prices that they charge are reasonable. We have a responsibility as this House, but as leaders in general, to make sure that we consider further adjustments on taxes and levies built into the petrol price, which contribute significantly to the high fuel price that our people pay on a daily basis. Failure to do so we will result in abantu bakuthi basitoyitoyele basibethe bangaziqondi kuba sizokwazi uthetha ngabo nge-imported inflation without being able to demonstrate clearly and empirically what we've tried to do in the medium to long term to alleviate the plight of the poor on this very important question. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Heron.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, already hard-pressed South African consumers are bracing for another double dose of pain with increasing fuel prices and increasing municipal rates, electricity and water tariffs. In fact, if you consider the seasonal costs of keeping warm in the dead of winter, the state will argue that there's very little it can do to intervene. It will point out that South Africa does not pump its own oil or refine oil any longer, so the base prices of petrol, diesel, and paraffin are beyond our control. And it will say that the country cannot afford to forego the R1.50 general fuel levy, which was suspended for a few months forever. With respect to electricity prices, it's common cause that we are presently held hostage by Eskom's monopoly and gross inefficiency. And most South Africans have little option but to cough up for the insult. Water too. It's a basic necessity and few residents have alternative sources to that supplied by their municipalities. The truth, however, is the state does have the power to cushion citizens from their pain. To exercise the power and prioritize that which should be prioritized requires a mindset shift in the state's approach to the way it spends its money. Instead of dividing the revenue according to historic formulas and spending patterns, we should be cutting the cloth to fit the suit we actually need, informed by our most pressing priorities. The approach is known as zero-based budgeting. It's not that the state can't afford to forgo R1.50 of the fuel levy, or that our towns and cities can't afford not to add punitive tariffs to our electricity and water bills, or that we can't afford a basic income grant for that matter. The reason we can't afford these things is because we prioritize other things. South Africa's economy, stumbling before COVID, is battling to resurrect itself. Many people are suffering. When you already can't afford to live, how can you possibly afford more increases to the cost of living? Fuel and electricity prices and hikes don't just affect owners of vehicles or domestic users. They have a knock-on impact on the prices of just about everything else, right down to the price of foods, school stationery, and medicines. Through actions such as a temporary reduction in the fuel levy and introducing the 350 Rand COVID special grant, the state has already indicated good intentions. Now it must take the very next step, getting struggling South Africans through the economic quicksand we're in and reducing the hardship and indignity of profound poverty. This is the priority. We must fund our national priorities and defund wasteful and unnecessary expenditure. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Sheikh Imam.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I heard my colleague, Honorable Nkwankwa, talking about getting oil from the African countries. Well, right now, why not get it from Russia? Pay with the ruble. No problem. Plenty of oil. It's just a matter of ordering and it will be delivered. You know, let us not forget that some of us own the oil, others control the oil. And of course, through the dollar. So maybe it's time to relook at why the price of oil is what it is today, like many other commodities that we all have, but in the hands of a few, particularly the African continent. Let us not forget about that. Now, yes, indeed, I must agree that we need to bring the cost of fuel down, because when the cost of fuel rises, it impacts on the most vulnerable. The cost of food products go up, the cost of travel goes up. There is no doubt about it. But also we need to look at some of the challenges our people face, particularly if you talk about travel costs, the special planning. Instead of taking businesses or people closer to live closer to their work, they are living far away from the work, which impacts on the money that they have available to spend on food, clothing, and shelter, because most of their monies, I think a very great percentage of a vulnerable person, an ordinary citizen's money today goes towards travel. Now, the road accident fund has been very badly managed. Let us all admit that. Maybe it's time to do away with the road accident fund, but not entirely. Let's include that maybe in the licensing and let's privatize it. So let some private insurance company come in and deal with issues of road accident fund, because clearly when it is controlled by the state, there's a perception out the state is a cash cow, and lots of legal experts have been manipulating the system and benefiting unduly from that. So maybe it's time to actually privatize that and take it away from the control of the government. The other way, I think I must agree that if we could, the retail and wholesale margins, if you are going to allow them to have competition, of course, it can bring the prices down. And when they start competing, you'll have a choice whether you want to go to a Shell or a Caltex or to this garage or that garage. That's one of the ways I think that we will be able to reduce the cost of fuel. But I think what is important to note that South Africa has a serious problem currently, and that is that the levels of poverty is very high. And based on that, when we have increases of this nature, particularly the most vulnerable people suffer as a result of this. So I think in order to lower these costs, we need to consider some of these things. And I know that there are lots and lots of ships waiting in the round to come through to South Africa. Let's take advantage of it. Remember, many others broke the sanctions during the days of apartheid. Let's break that and get the fuel going into the country. Thank you.
Long way.
Deputy Speaker, the public outcry by Honorable Kevin Mileham of the DA against the regulation of the domestic oil market will likely to lead to mixed effects. Of course, the deregulation of the domestic oil market in some ways will pave the future that will set South Africa on a road to recovery in response to the fuel price hikes through the promotion of competition, but in other ways will trigger the perverse negative effects that must be avoided at all costs. For instance, South Africa is not a landlocked country from an exogenous viewpoint, but it does not have favorable geographical locations from the endogenous viewpoint either. In particular, 6 out of 9 provinces are not coastal and thus do not have the direct access to the sea to trade goods directly in the international system. As such, non-coastal provinces, which are mostly former Bantustan homeland, will be disadvantaged by the deregulation of the domestic oil market, as they will incur spikes in transport costs and petrol prices due to their distance from the coastal lines. Chairperson, Honorable Deputy Speaker, the proposal for the deregulation of the domestic oil industry by Honorable Mileham is a smokescreen. To be frank, deregulation will disadvantage the agricultural and mining sectors in the non-coastal provinces, as the current regulatory system averages the secondary transport cost, whilst a deregulated market will contain actual transport and storage costs as part of the margin. At the moment, the regulation of the domestic oil market by the ANC-led government ensures that non-coastal provinces pay the same amount as coastal provinces for the transport and storage cost of petroleum products to their communities, whereas deregulation will negatively affect communities in the non-coastal provinces, as delivering small volumes of petroleum products over long distances is expensive. Moreover, the regulation of the domestic oil market by the ANC-led government already brings relief to the people through cheaper input costs for food security due to the pricing mechanism, which only recognizes one average price for the transport and storage cost of petroleum products. The proposal made by Honorable Mileham that the deregulation of domestic oil market is the best way that the ANC-led government can minimize the burden of fuel price hikes on the poorer motorists and households, as well as emerging small businesses, must be understood within a framework of special interest versus collective interest. Honorable Mileham makes his proposal for the deregulation of the domestic oil market on the basis of special interest rather than collective interest. And this special interest style approach results in the distortion of one crucial issue. Currently, 75% of South Africa's petroleum products is consumed between KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng provinces, which is the direct result not only of the Durban to Johannesburg pipeline, but also the concentrated market structure of the apartheid era. One of the greatest risks of this market concentration is that if left unregulated, it can induce oil majors to pull out from areas where the transport and storage costs of petroleum products are above the level of recovery in favor of areas where the actual costs are below the cost of recovery. In short, the deregulation of domestic oil market is likely to favor the poorer motorists and households, as well as emerging businesses in Gauteng, where the DA currently runs the metros. This misleading proposal for the deregulation of domestic oil market reflects the beggar by thy neighbor neoliberal policy, where the benefits of deregulation will be enjoyed by some provinces while adversely affecting other provinces, such as the Western Cape, with the rise in shipping costs in that province. In other words, Honorable Mileham is a flip-flopper who comes in Parliament calling for the deregulation of the domestic oil market, but in reality, deregulation will reflect actual and not average costs for the storage and transportation of petroleum products, thereby increasing fuel prices in the Western Cape rather than reducing them. Honorable Mazona, I'll ask you to pronounce my surname. You will fail dismally. His proposal that the Competition Commission can address market concentration has the greatest emotional appeal to the public at large. The domestic oil market is, of course, more complicated than the fallacy in this proposal. The oil industry is capital intensive, which implies that there is limited access than open access in the industry. Moreover, the Fuel Retailers Association report highlighted that 60% of the 4,790 service stations in South Africa are under the control of oil majors. And this is an indication that transformation in the domestic oil market remains a challenge. Therefore, the internal monopoly of oil majors would not necessarily break down under the pressure of competition as a result of the deregulation proposed by Honorable Mileham. The Competition Commission cannot eliminate the danger of significant monopoly control over the oil majors in South Africa. Even if the Competition Commission was to cap the monopoly control of oil majors, it would not be able to deal with the possibilities of increased delivery costs to non-coastal provinces and the withdrawal from supplying these provinces due to high costs, which would ultimately trigger shortage of petrol products. By now, Deputy Speaker, you should be aware that this honorable member comes to Parliament in his pajamas as he is clearly sleeping on the job through sleeping on fact-based evidence. Honorable Mileham further proposes that
on a point of order. You have to sit down when I...
Order, honorable members.
I will be told that.
Order, honorable members. Order. Order, honorable Mahlaude, just 1 second. Yes, Honorable Mazoni, what are you raising on?
Deputy Speaker, the Honourable Mahola has just indicated that Mr. Mileham...
Oh, please, just give the Honourable Member a chance to finish, please, man. I can't hear her.
Mahola, whichever one you want. Has just indicated that Mr. Mileham comes to Parliament dressed in his pajamas. Now, it's not my fault that the gentleman doesn't have a good sense of dress, but anyone else would see that Mr. Mileham is in a perfectly good suit. That kind of insult.
Honourable Mazoni, really? Must you really take away our time like that? No, that's out of order, man. That's not a point of order. Go ahead, Honourable Mahlaule.
Chair, please, can I have that ruling be sent to the Rules Committee for investigation? Thank you.
No, the Rules Committee won't accept it even to come in, even through the window. Absolutely. No. We're not going to debate that. Go ahead, Honorable Mahlaule.
Who's falling?
What's that? No. Honorable Paulson, cool your heels, please. Man. Just cool your heels. Go ahead, Honorable Mahlaule.
Thank you very much, Chair. This honorable member further proposes that the ANC-led government should scrap the fuel levy entirely, as it is aggressive. It is regressive tax and impact on input costs to the economy. This will supposedly save the poorer motorists and households, as well as the emerging small businesses, approximately 393 per litre. His attempt to put pressures on the ANC-led government to concede to his ill advice will not make the inevitable fuel price hikes and the wretched living conditions of the majority even worse in two negative ways. Firstly, South Africa is a net importer of crude oil and petroleum products, and therefore it does not have a monopoly power to drive a hard bargain with international oil producers and subsequently impose an unduly low price on them. The international price for petroleum product is set by international refining centers from which international oil producers set global prices. In short, it is improbable that scrapping the rand-denominated fuel levy will offset the dollar-denominated import parity price of oil and petroleum products, unless the strength of the rand improves relative to the dollar, which is not likely in this conjuncture. Given the strength of the dollar relative to the rand, it is plausible to argue that Honorable Mileham's proposal has a glimpse of spite as it is clearly tinkering on the edges and speaking about a few cents rather than any major price reduction in the fuel price. Secondly, South Africa is a tax-dependent state, and therefore collecting taxes from fuel sales generates the much-needed revenue to crowd in funding the support both social programs like Social Security grant and the costly non-renewable resources of energy that he always is fixated on. This is why the ANC-led government has introduced the temporary relief on the fuel levy, which currently amounts to R1.50 per litre to minimize the burden of fuel price hikes on South African consumers. But since Honorable Mileham, as a false messiah, suggests that we should scrap the fuel levy entirely, then he should at least make a concrete proposal to the public about how that revenue, which will be lost to the fiscus through scrapping the fuel, and how we can recoup that under a tight fiscal constraint. Of course, our neighboring countries have a lower tax base requirement, and therefore fuel is cheaper than in South Africa. However, a zero-sum game, the lowering of the fuel tax means recovering of the money for the fiscus from other forms of taxation, and this will obviously be a slap in the face of the working class, but not the wealthy rich that the DA represent. In some countries, a wealth tax is imposed to reduce inequality, and perhaps Honorable Mileham might consider that as a private bill, member's bill. Another proposal made by Honorable Mileham is that the scrapping of RAF will introduce the burden of fuel price hikes in South Africa consumers. However, RAF is a social benefit scheme for users on the road affected by accidents and is therefore critical. Privilege will always make somebody ignorant to such things. I'm not surprised. It's privilege. The only sign of cheerful in this debate is that Honorable Mileham lacks the capacity to grapple with the fact that the cost of scrapping RAF and the fuel levy far outweighs the benefit. Nevertheless, the committee will continue working with industry stakeholders to find a sustainable way to minimize fuel price hikes, including appealing to the minister to take a long-term review on pricing mechanism. In this regard, Honorable Deputy Speaker, it is important in this session to say the country must put as critical the restoration of refining capacity to ensure the supply of fuel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Chapter. Thank you, Honorable Deputy. The historical genesis traces back to 27, as it was called then, South to $28 a barrel, when its actual price at the time was $49 a barrel. The practical implementation of hikes on the poor and fuel hikes increasing, and because of distribution, the poor acts on the economy is also dire. Revenue streams in the market of diesel has lowered production. In agriculture, food production has also been affected severely. The poor rail system has also ensured that our people are forced to use buses and taxis at an increased fare. We therefore need to subsidize South Africans during these difficult times. We have been on the record calling for VAT on staple items to be scrapped in order to subsidize the poor. We also need to diversify our energy streams. Part of this, Honorable Speaker, would require a climate-sensitive oil exploration drive to caution South Africans from these hikes. We are reliably informed that the World Bank has approved $7.6 billion
to South Africa. This money must help to subsidize the poor and empower the state to develop new partnerships with the private sector, particularly the cost of deregulate.
Brother Jafta.
Honorable Speaker. Deputy Speaker.
Complete your point that your time is flying out here. Honorable Jafta, we regret we can't hear you, man. And unfortunately also, we gave you a little 12 seconds to see if it works out. So we can't, it's a pity. We hope that that infrastructure and reception in that area will improve. No, we can't hear you. There's no point, sorry. So we have to move to the next speaker. Cope, is Cope here? No. Honorable Gwahube?
Sihlalo namhlanje ndithi mandithethe nabantu baseMzantsi Afrika ndingathethi nani malunga eParlamente. Isizathu sesokuba lo msebenzi siwenza apha uchaphazela wonke ummi weli. Yiyo loo nto kumele siqinisekise into yobana urhulumente wenza kangangoko anako ukukhusela abantu kumaxabiso aphezulu angumnqantsi kubantu abaninzi. Izigidi ngezigidi zabantu beli bahlala phantsi kweemeko zentlupheko. Abaninzi babo baswela ingqesho, into ethetha ukuthi kumizi akukho mali ingenayo. Bathi benyamezele oko urhulumente we-ANC anyusa amaxabiso epetrol. Xa kunyuka ixabiso lepetrol, kunyuka amaxabiso okutya, kunyuka amaxabiso eeteksi neebhasi eziya kwindawo zokusebenza. Imali yomzali wamkela igranti yabantwana iphelele endleleni engekayo noyofika edolophini, ingoneli kwa oko kutya ayokuthenga. Abantu bayaphela yindlala, abantwana bakhubazekile kungafumani ukutya okusempilweni besiya esikolweni belambile. Abantu abadala abantu abadala abondla iifemeli zabo bayastruglisha ukwenza kanjalo. Namhlanje ndithi ndifuna ukukhumbula uThabang van Staden oneminyaka 826 othathe ubomi bakhe emncinci ngokubana ebestruglisha ukukhangela amathuba omsebenzi. Ukuba namhlanje asithathi amanyathelo minister okususa irhafu amaxabiso epetrol, sibulala amaphupha abo baxhomekeke kuthi sizinkokeli zabo. Lamanani sithetha ngawo apho ngabantu abaphilayo. Abayomizekelo nje, uHonorable Mahlaule apha uthetha ngento bana urhulumente uxakekile akazukwazi ukuhlisa lamaxabiso. Kodwa akathethi nyani. Inyaniso yokuba lo urhulumente akakhathali. Ukuba besinorhulumente okhathalayo ebengasoze avume konyuke amaxabiso epetrol nokutya ngezinga esilibonayo. Inyaniso yokuba le mali siyibhatalela ipetrol edurayo iya kwiipokotho zabo, thina siphethwe ngohlohle sabo. Isixa semali esibhatalelwa ipetrol iya kwingxowa karhulumente. Benzani ngale mali? bayayirhwaphiliza umuntu ngamnye azakhela inkandla nephalaphala yakhe bachitha i-1.8 billion bezikhusela bona nge-VIP protection. Ukuba ngaba urhulumente bekhathala ebeza kuhlisa ixabiso lepetrol ebekazawususa le rhafu ayi-announce namhlanje uMinister Mantashe loo nto leyo ebezawuhlisa ixabiso lokutya anyuse inkxasomali yabantu abangathathi ntweni enze amathuba omsebenzi. Abantu beli kudala becinezelekile phantsi kweemeko ezibuhlungu. Singumbutho we-DA sihlaba ukhwelo sisithi makukhululwe uluntu kuziswe imisebenzi abantu bazofumana isidima malihlise ixabiso lepetrol isuse le hafu Minister Mantashe.
Honorable the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker, honorable members of this House. I want to make 3 points in limine. One, the DA survey, there's one thing that was not disclosed. What was the question? Because the question in the survey influences the outcome, even if it's a desktop research. So if your question is, should we cut the price? Obviously, the answer will, please cut it, we'll get 100 signatures until the question is scientific. Secondly, one of the things that I've grown to understand, is that my ministry doesn't talk about levy. I don't talk about levy. I don't talk about tax. I don't talk about fund. I don't talk about finance. I don't talk about money. All those things kudilwa ngazo kwinto ekuthiwa i-budget ekuMinister of Finance. That is the second point. The third point I want to make is that for society to engage in a comprehensive discussion, we must give society information so that the society debate with us in a rational way. Let me get to that now. Honorable members, 3 major factors impacted on global energy system in the last 2 years. The first one was COVID-19 pandemic. In what way? In what way? Because it affected supply across all sectors. Secondly, it is the increased price of natural gas in Europe in 2021, causing increases in oil prices as alternatives were sought. Prior to the sanctions, Russia was the dominant supplier of diesel in Europe. Third, geopolitical conflict in the Central Eastern Europe, resulting in increased prices in crude oil and petroleum products in the last 5 months. Now, all of us, therefore, have a responsibility to inform society instead of just inciting society. We need to get a solution that will be sustainable, that will be lasting. Now, the conflict has since moved into a global economic war involving the West. Sanctioned by USA and the EU on Russia oil and petroleum products have resulted in major imbalance in the demand and supply, that prompting high fuel prices. Now, we wish to be insulated from the globe. We're part of the globe. We're not insulated from the globe. We're part of it. Not by choice, it's reality. Now, other casualties of this situation in South Africa and globally are food prices, cooking oil, grains, and other food items. The UN Secretary General lamented the high cost of wheat, and the potential increase of shortages in basic foodstuffs. And that is not by some minister in South Africa, it's the United Nations Secretary General, because he has an overview of the globe. And he knows that this doesn't affect us domestically, it's affecting the globe. The use of energy as an economic weapon affects developing countries disproportionately. We pay a higher price than the developed countries. That's why when Europe is under pressure, they tell us not to use coal, they go and buy more coal, including our coal, and use it because they're developed, they have the power, and we are an encircled nation, which is used as a conduit of ideas of developed nations. And it's an issue that we must deal with openly as a country. Angela Merkel, a highly respected leader in the world, cautioned against action that could make life more difficult for many people around the world. But she has retired and everybody defied her. To cut off the Russian Federation from global petroleum supply, a country that accounts 11% of that global supply, exposes developing countries to unaffordable price increases. Our economies are laid bare to imported inflation and high interest rates that could ultimately cause recession throughout the world economies, adversely affecting developing and underdeveloped ones. Imbalance in petroleum product supply may also lead to fuel shortages as Europe competes for alternatives. Let me explain this, because I had some proposal that let's focus on the continent. Unfortunately, petroleum products, oil, is priced globally. Whether you order it in Angola, or you get it in Nigeria, or you get it in Equatorial Guinea, which we do get petroleum from those countries. And let me tell you that we've increased the volumes from the continent because we have been working on increasing intra-Africa trade. So we have the benefits of that, but the reality of the matter is that we are not isolated from the globe. We're here, we're part of the globe. Now, this bleak outlook extends to the emergence of China from lockdown, which will significantly increase the price of crude oil. Our airlines in the continent are already experiencing difficulties which they will not survive if the situation is sustained beyond 6 months. Not in South Africa, I'm talking now of the continent. Now, it therefore begs the question, if, as we were told, the conflict is one of democracy versus authoritarianism, why afflicting democracies of developing countries subjected to untold misery? It's a debate we should have instead of taking a trip to Ukraine, Mr. Stenezer, and I take my own trip to Russia, to Moscow. It doesn't matter what we should be talking about. It requires us to do a detailed analysis rather than being simplistic. Simplistic solutions do not last. Now, Western countries should be reminded that economic war they have unleashed disproportionately impacts South Africa and countries like ours. You know, I was reminding somebody last week that I grew up in Kala. It's a village. There are things called rondavels with no windows, just holes, and you use cloth to close them. If you are beating up a cat and you close a rondavel with no escape route, you are going to lose an eye. So if NATO want to extend to Ukraine and squeeze Russia, they're going to lose an eye. So let's not be simplistic about our analysis. Let us be scientific. Now, honorable members, our government is committed to explore numerous possibilities. You know, Mr. Mileham, when you're speaking, I said there respectfully and respected you. But I know you're going to kick dust and do all sorts of things when I'm speaking. I'm expecting it. It happens all the time. But when you speak, I sit there quietly, listen to you respectfully. Now, recently, our ministry, together with the Treasury, reduced the fuel levy by 150 per litre. It's not by 150, it's by 150 per litre. It makes a big difference because when you just say 150, you think that we just give 150. It's 150 per litre. And we're continuing with that for 3 months now, and we've already agreed that at least at best in July, we can sustain 75 cents. Now, where does that money come from? Because we normally talk about loosely that the president, Mr. Mileham, when you were speaking here, referred to the strategic stock. So somebody did refer to the strategic stock, was it you? But somebody referred to the strategic stock. When that strategic stock was sold, it was headlines that somebody has stolen a strategic stock, is sold illegally, and was headline. When we brought it back, no articles were written about it. We brought it back, I'm telling you now. Now, having brought it back, it is only that strategic stock that helped us to have a capacity to provide 150. It's not some money from the fiscus. It's about that strategic stock sold to replace the relief to the user. Now, I've not heard anybody, Paulson, keep quiet. I know that you swallowed the whistle. Keep quiet. Now.
Yes. Yes, Honorable Paulson. Order. Honorable members. Honorable members, order, please.
Now, Speaker, there's an example of how you sleep on the job. Yeah, this insulted me now that this is just that day smiling. You order him to withdraw that.
I can't hear you, Honorable Member. What are you saying?
Oh, you order him to
I'm trying to ask people to be quiet so that I can hear you.
It's your kettle here. Hold the kettle.
Now listen to it. Now.
Okay, I withdraw that. My apologies. It's an insulted kettle. Anyway, this one, he insulted me now.
No, man. Honorable Member. Honorable Member, please take your seat.
No, I'm not going to take my. Are you going to order him to withdraw?
What? Were you insulted? Are you saying you were insulted?
He insulted me this one.
No, but you can't say this one. Speak properly, Honorable Member.
No, man, he insulted me.
Honorable Member, take your seat, please, man. Go ahead, Honorable Minister.
On a point of order, Deputy Speaker.
Yes.
We are dealing with
on a point of order, Deputy Speaker.
What's your point of order, Honorable Member?
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, you have perfectly heard, and if you didn't hear, you can ask the staff there in front. No, but I'm on a point of order. Why?
Yes. Honorable Minister.
What is this?
Go ahead, Honorable Member.
Hey, Banna.
I do.
No, but the staff there in front of you, if you didn't hear, maybe because you are sleeping on the job or because of old age or you were busy with something else. There are staff there that is supposed to assist you. The Honorable Minister made an insult towards Nazir.
Honorable,
to withdraw it.
Honorable Member.
Withdraw it.
Honorable Member.
You must withdraw it. He insults Nazir and then you claim you didn't.
What's the insult? I asked you and him.
No.
None of you have said it.
Tell you. That is their job. The staff there in front of you must tell you.
Okay. All right.
They must tell you. What are they there for?
Oh, okay. Honorable Member, take it easy.
He said Nazir have swallowed a whistle. That is what he said. He said Nazir has swallowed a whistle, and then you.
Now, Honorable Member.
Okay. First, I must determine whether swallowing a whistle is an insult, and if it's an insult, we'll rule against it. I have never heard such an insult before in my 67 years. Hold on. They will tell me. Honorable Minister, proceed.
The house when you think you are fun.
Proceed, Honorable Minister.
Just like to collapse the house thinking.
No. Okay. That's enough.
Thank you very much. We are dealing with a global challenge, not just a domestic problem. So our discussion must be located within a global debate. And that is the appeal I'm making to every member of parliament. And our country's response to these challenges is in line with industrialized and industrializing countries. So if we do something unique, we are likely to miss the point. I want to remind the members of parliament that the price of oil was $121 a barrel yesterday. It used to be around 40, it even dropped to 20 at one time. It is now $121 a barrel. And then we must respond to that as a country. We must respond to that as a country, not be emotional. If need be, I was talking to the chairperson of the portfolio committee, I said to him, we should consider importing crude oil from Russia at a low price. And because it is not sanctioned. Of all the sanctions, there are no sanctions against crude oil. So we can import crude oil from Russia at a lower price. Now, currently, we are not having our own oil except the limited one by Sasol. Now, the other point that we should work together on is to allow exploration of gas and oil in our land. There's plenty of it. And if every time we're taken to court because we're doing exploration, we must get the support of the country and everybody, irrespective of party, because oil that was discovered in Namibia stretches into the Northern Cape side. So the Northern Cape is likely to produce oil in the near future, provided we go through our long court cases. That's it. We'll give it to anybody who wants to do exploration and prepare to do the development. Okay, because I'm not a prisoner of your white monopoly capital theory, which is a flawed theory. I want development, I want petroleum, I want gas in South Africa. Now, as we got transition to electrical vehicles, we must accelerate that pace. Green hydrogen, which have started, must be accelerated. And therefore, it is an issue that we must debate. What we should understand, I hear the call to do away with road accident fund. Actually, I don't know, it's not in my scope, but as far as I'm concerned, it's the easiest thing to do because the state will actually not have responsibility for accidents. People must have to self-insure. If you're not insured, you die, you don't get any compensation. You injure yourself, you don't get any compensation. If that is the choice that South Africans want to take, it's a choice that must be explicit and we appreciate it. At this point in time, if you say your support was from truckers and all those things, count accidents that are caused by trucks and buses on the road. There are a lot of them. So as we deal with those issues, we must understand them. Honorable members, we are also beginning to notice an adulteration of fuel. This is confirmed by the sample picked up in service station where people mix diesel and petrol and paraffin. We should deal with those issues. Let me conclude, my time is getting out, is that in the present, the only sustainable solution for our energy crisis is to end the conflict in Central Europe. Peace is the only solution. To our responsibility as a government is to continue to implement measures to mitigate against undue burden on the consumer.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. The time has expired.
Honorable members, that concludes the debate.
Bring back the whistle.
Honorable members, by order. Honorable members, by agreement, we will take the following two items as fifth and sixth orders. These are draft notices on magistrate and judges' salaries. Further, it has also been agreed that there will be no declaration on the items. The Secretary will read the fifth order.
Consideration of draft notice and schedule determining the rate with effect from 1st April 2021 at which salaries, allowances, and benefits are payable to magistrates annually for approval by Parliament in terms of Section 13(12)(3) of the Magistrate Act 1993, Act number 90 of 1993.
Okay, are there any objections to the approval of the draft notice and schedule determining the rate with effect from April 1, 2021, at which salaries, allowances, and benefits are payable to magistrate annually for approval by Parliament in terms of Section 12(3) of Magistrate Act 1993, Act number 90 of 1993? No objection.
No. We're objecting. The EFF is objecting.
We'll note the EFF's objection. Thank you.
House Chair, please.
It's agreed.
DA supports.
Okay. Thank you. We'll note that. The Secretary will read the last order of the day.
Consideration of draft notice and schedule determining the rate with effect from 1 April 2021 at which salaries, allowances, and benefits are payable to Constitutional Court judges and judges annually for approval by Parliament in terms of Section 2(4) of the Judges' Remuneration and Conditions of Employment Act 2001, Act number 47 of 2001.
Are there any objections to the approval of the draft notice and schedule determining the rate with effect from April 1, 2021, at which salaries, allowances, benefits are payable to Constitutional Court judges and judges annually for approval by Parliament in terms of Section 2(4) of the Judges' Remuneration and Conditions of Employment Act 2001, Act number 47 of 2001.
Deputy Speaker, please note the objection of the EFF, especially that Judge Rondo is there.
We'll note the objection of the EFF, otherwise agreed to. Honorable members, thank you very much. That concludes the business of the day. The House is adjourned.
Speaker.